All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So we are beginning here our final briefing for today's annular eclipse. This is a decision support briefing based off the latest forecast information as of 8 o'clock this morning. And this will be the final briefing of the event. Just a little bit of bookkeeping before we get started here. This webinar will be recorded. And we will be sending you the final edited version of the recording, as well as the slides that we're sharing here today with you in an email once we wrap up the webinar. And we also want to call your attention to that question box of GoToWebinar. We will be opening up the floor for any last minute questions that any of you may have once we finish up the webinar here today. So if you have any questions as we kind of go through these next few slides, don't hesitate to put them there in the question box. We're monitoring that, and we'll answer them by the end of the briefing. So without further ado, we'll jump in. Just a quick kind of recap of the timeline of today's eclipse. We're going to kind of start seeing the effects by mid-morning, about 10:20, 10:30, throughout the I-35 corridor and west into Hill Country and the Southern Edwards Plateau. And again, we're going to see that peak, so about the 90% obscuration in San Antonio and Uvalde, right, between about 11:50 and 11:55. So right about, right before the lunch hour. And then we'll kind of see the eclipse trend down through the early afternoon till about 1:30. So just a bit of a reminder there in terms of the timeline that we're looking at for the eclipse here today. Again, just another last minute reminder, we've really been emphasizing that eye safety, and we know all of y'all have done a really good job of distributing those eclipse glasses. So again, just as we head into the rest of this morning leading up to the event, we remind everybody that the only safe way to view the eclipse is with those eclipse glasses. Ordinary sunglasses are not enough to safely view the eclipse today. And then also, if you're going to be photographing or viewing the eclipse through binoculars or a telescope, it's also really important to make sure that you have solar filters on those devices as well, as it's not safe to view those without or view the eclipse with those devices if they don't have a solar filter on them. Getting into the the forecast and kind of the main points here over the next several hours. Yesterday's cold front is now well to the south of the area, so it's well through the region and out into the Gulf of Mexico. Though we are still dealing with some light rain showers out there this morning, particularly over portions of the Rio Grande Plains and the Southern Edwards Plateau. And with those rain showers, we're dealing with lingering clouds, and we do anticipate that those straggling clouds will continue to be a factor in the forecast, particularly within that path of annularity as we move through late this morning and early afternoon in that peak viewing time of the eclipse. Concisely, we are expecting that best viewing within the path of annularity will be out over Hill Country, Kerrville, Fredericksburg. And this is an area where the skies will begin to trend mostly sunny by very late this morning and early afternoon in the peak viewing time. But unfortunately, we're expecting some continuing cloud coverage, at least broken clouds, everywhere else outside of those Hill Country areas. And this would include the San Antonio metro. And that could lead to some potential obscuration of the sun during that peak viewing of the eclipse. Looking at the surface map real quick with the path of annularity overlaid, you can see the front this morning is pushed well to our south and east, out over the Gulf of Mexico, down to near the Brownsville area. So it is completely through, and we're kind of within northerly winds behind that boundary. Looking at the temperatures, particularly over Hill Country, we can really see the impacts of that post-frontal air mass starting to come into the area. Latest observations have temperatures across the 50s over a good portion of Hill Country and the Southern Edwards Plateau, with temperatures steadily rising the further south and east you go in our area. So we're more so in the 60s through the Austin and San Antonio area. We still have some locations over the southwest in the lower half of the 70s here this morning. Current satellite, this is an IR infrared band that we used given the transition that's ongoing from nighttime to daytime. But I'll call your attention basically along and south of Interstate 10 in our area, where we can kind of see these lighter gray returns. And these are those clouds that we were talking about that are lingering behind the cold front early this morning. And we do anticipate will continue to kind of straggle and be present across the area as we go through the rest of this morning and into the early afternoon. So you can kind of see, unfortunately, if we kind of roughly draw that path of annularity in, we can see that the clouds are present within that path of peak viewing, so to speak, and we do expect that they'll continue to be a factor. Looking at the radar, as we had mentioned in the first couple slides, there are a few rain showers out there. Right at the very bottom of your screen, there's some light to moderate rainfall ongoing south of Eagle Pass, but very near Carrizo Springs at the current moment. And then we have some more scattered to isolated shower activity, kind of from Brackettville over towards Uvalde at the current hour as well, underneath some of that cloud coverage that we have hanging on. Getting into our forecast, which was just updated within the last hour through this morning for both temperature and most importantly, the sky cover, starting here at 10 a.m. You can kind of see, what we were alluding to with the sky cover becoming kind of increasingly problematic, if you want to put it that way, in areas outside of hill country, say that Fredericksburg and Kerrville area. So you can see we're going to be dealing with partly sunny skies over Rock Springs and San Antonio to just straight up, mostly cloudy to overcast skies in areas further southwest through mid-morning once the effects of the eclipse start to, take effect across the area. Temperatures, we should see some moderation into the lower half of the 60s over hill country with mid 60s, perhaps a few 70s over areas further south and west. Jumping ahead to noon, we will start to see some clearing with the effects being most prominent over far north and eastern locations in the path of annularity. So we can see sky conditions continue to improve over those hill country zones where we're anticipating the best viewing today during the eclipse. But again, you get into the San Antonio metro, portions of the coastal plains, and then areas further southwest. We are expecting, cloud cover to be around by the time we get to that peak, which could lead to filtered sunshine and potentially obscured viewing of the eclipse. And again, that'll be from areas in the San Antonio metro, coastal plains, and points south and west. So that is a factor that we're anticipating will be in play throughout the eclipse today. Temperatures should be mid 60s by peak viewing over hill country, lower half of the 70s everywhere else. And then by the time we get to 2 o'clock and pretty much the end of the eclipse here in south central Texas, you can still see that we're probably going to have some cloud cover sticking around, from San Antonio, coastal plains, points southwest, with mostly sunny skies further north in hill country. And by the end of the eclipse, we should see temperatures in the 70s just about everywhere in the area, with temperatures perhaps approaching 80 in the San Antonio and coastal plains areas. Just one more time, the high temperatures as we move beyond 2 o'clock today. We're expecting highs in the lower half of the 80s along and east of I-35 and into the southern Edwards Plateau, with temperatures remaining in the upper 70s over hill country. The other thing we want to mention, we've talked a lot about air temperature and sky cover here, but we are anticipating continued kind of breezy to occasionally gusty north winds as we continue to kind of deal with northerly winds behind the departed cold front. And the latest gusts we have show that widespread 20 to 25 mile an hour gusts are a good bet across that path of annularity. We could even see spots, say, over portions of the southern Edwards Plateau going up towards Rock Springs, and then also down and into the San Antonio area where we could have gusts approach even 30 miles an hour. So We just want to hit one more time for all those people that might be hosting outdoor events out there. Make sure those tents are tied down and secured, and any other loose objects that might get blown around in the wind, make sure those are secured, because we are expecting gusty winds to continue through the first half of this afternoon and really that peak viewing time of the eclipse. Hazards, we're not anticipating any significant hazards as we've been messaging over the last several days. Again, some limited fire weather concern will exist today with the drier air in place behind the front and those breezy winds, but we're expecting it to be on the limited side, and we're not anticipating anything in the way of significant fire weather impacts. One more reminder, if you are looking for more specific point-based forecast information, we would like to refer you to weather.gov/forecast points. And essentially, you can navigate around on a map that's provided there on that website and click to get essentially an interactive kind of point and click forecast, similar to the example you see on the left here. That'll break it out pretty much hour by hour and give you a pretty comprehensive set of weather information. So again, the website is weather.gov/forecast points, or alternatively, you could scan the QR code that we have here shown at the right of this slide. We've provided a few of those QR codes for you here for locations, particularly within that path of annularity. So if anybody on the webinar here this morning is tuning in from any of these areas, feel free to just use one of these QR codes as a shortcut. And if you're tuning in from somewhere else, again, you can go to that forecast points website we showed on the previous slide and get the specific forecast information for your area. So in summary, the cold front now well to our south and east in the Gulf of Mexico and deep South Texas. But behind it, we're going to still be contending with clouds in that path of annularity through the peak viewing time of today's eclipse. Again, based off our latest forecast, we're expecting those locations, say along I-10 to the northwest of San Antonio in the hill country, to have those best viewing conditions by the time we get to midday and kind of the peak viewing time of the eclipse, where we're expecting mostly sunny skies by midday. But then you get into the San Antonio metro, the coastal plains, and then points further south and west moving towards the Rio Grande. We are expecting clouds to continue to persist through the best viewing of the eclipse, which could lead to some obscuration for people that are hoping to see it. We are expecting that those clouds are going to continue to hang on. And most importantly, we're going to be providing updates throughout this morning on the latest trends, particularly in cloud cover in NWS Chat 2.0 on Slack. So we would refer you to there for the latest information, because we are going to be providing updates on how the satellite and even the radar are trending as we get closer to the best viewing time of the eclipse. So be paying attention to NWS Chat, because we'll be providing additional information there. And then again, this is the final briefing of the event. And if you have any additional questions, say beyond the webinar today, feel free to reach out to any of the addresses that you see on the right of this slide, and we would be more than happy to help you out with any of those questions that you may have. So that is all I have for you guys this morning. Again, I would like to open up the floor here for the next minute or so for any questions that you guys might have. Again, feel free to drop those in the question box. We'll be watching that here for the next minute or so before we end the webinar.